Hi everyone, my name is Jim. I wanted to share a journal that I made for my mother for Mother's Day this year. Her name is Anna Marie. This journal was made from an old vintage book that I found at Goodwill, so I gutted it, covered it with some hand marbled paper that I found on some of my travels. There is a sea glass charm that I got in California in my work. This journal has lots and lots of my artwork in it. There are over 30 pieces of artwork: watercolor, acrylics, sketching, sewing, stamping, some hand carved stamps, just a lot of interesting different things that I've been wanting to try. So the front cover has the rose watercolor. My mother told me one time that yellow roses were lucky for her, so I put that on the front cover. The back cover has a little tuck spot for a picture. I took all the pictures out for the video, so let's take a look inside. So the first page, I put a pocket on the inside, and this is a watercolor of mine. I signed all my watercolors. This is just a journaling card with some botanical pictures that I found from a book, and I made her a card with lots of different washi tape to tape her own pictures in the book. Almost every page is tea or coffee stained. This is just a card and another clipping from a botanical book, and this didn't turn the way I wanted it to, so I put this little safety pin with a bead on it so you could grab it and turn. A little quote. I do a little bit of calligraphy. This is a tuck spot here that I made from a book page and a little quote. Just a ripped paper pocket, and inside the pocket is a card. I did some cool inking reliefs that I learned from Jibid Neri on YouTube, and I also picked some flowers and pressed them. So this is a little journaling card that you can write on. Picture of my dad when he was younger. Some little beaded paper clips. This page, I really don't know how to sew, but my mother gave me a sewing machine, so because she knew I like to have sewing on the side of the journals, so I made this kind of look like a quilt. I made it into a pocket, so you can put things in the pocket. Found this great quote from Emily Dickinson: "Give me sunset and a cup." So I just drew a cup and found a cool picture of a sunset that I liked and watercolored it, and then I cut it and made it into a little tuck for a picture. Just some more of that hand marbled paper with a little butterfly made into a pocket. This is a watercolor. This tea stain paper takes watercolor pretty well. I think this is a combination of watercolor, and I also used some of my new Inktense pencils, and those are awesome. Looks so vibrant. Another little watercolor of a mouse made into a pocket. This is just tracing paper, and I stamped on the front and the back and then folded it so it kind of looked like there were some flowers in the background. Found that great quote about flowers. I got this new Tomo River paper that I love. It's super thin, so it's great for journals, and it takes watercolor amazingly well. I bought some watercolor mask that I've never used before, so I used that mask to make the stars before I painted this, and then just sewed it and made it into a couple little pockets. My daughter Olivia is learning how to embroider, so she sent me a little piece of her embroidery so that I could make into a tuck spot for this journal. Just backed it with a little bit of watercolor paper, and then I took pieces of the envelope and put behind the picture. This is just watercolor and pen and ink, sewn tracing paper that is inked. My mother won a contest for the biggest crappie for the year, I think, when I was a little boy. So I found this picture of a crappie, and I made this neat little kind of library card page with like underwater plants that you could kind of see through, and then it lifts up, and I made it a little pocket. Lots of journaling spots. My daughter is turning into a great little photographer, so she took this picture. Actually, she took both these pictures, so I include them in the journal. My youngest, she took this picture at the Birmingham Botanical Gardens, where my daughter oldest goes to school, and I liked it, so I printed it on a glassine bag. And she also took this picture of a holly hedge, and I loved how it turned out, so I just stuck that in here for my mother to have. Another little watercolor on the back of a piece of paper. Just I think this was from an old calendar, and I stitched around it, made it into a pocket. My mother makes the best blackberry pie in the world, and so we used to go blackberry and raspberry picking when I was little, and I actually did a watercolor on the reverse side of this, and the red seeped through and it looked like berry stains. So I drew with those Inktense colored pencils some blackberries and found a great little blackberry quote. Some poppy watercolor. This is interesting. I did it on tea stained watercolor paper. It was just a pen and ink, and then I added a little bit of watercolor. It's coffee beans. Then I did these beans on another piece of paper and glued them on, so it's hard to tell, but they're three-dimensional. That was from one of my wife's shirts that she was going to throw away, and I cut it off and put it in there. A pocket made from a piece of handmade paper, and then I did a little watercolor of a ladybug on it. I tried this. It's not my favorite. I had these little sort of wax bags, so I did a painting over lots of different texts. I have music paper and dictionary paper and paper from a nature book, so I cut it up, and these are some skeleton leaves. It's okay how it turned out. Found a little feather to put on the top for a journaling page. I made this little hand-beaded paperclip. Another watercolor across the page. This is another thing I learned from Jibbid, this great little, made my own envelope, but then I think this was from a plant book about different types of plants, so there were all types of information. It was black and white, so I watercolored over it and then found this goofy little silk leaf and then sewed it into it, so it's just like how it sounds and how it feels. Oh, I just did this. This was a copy of another artist's work that I painted myself, and my mother liked it, and I had already written all over it, so I just did another one for her and backed it on some neat mulberry paper, made it into a pocket. These are pictures of grandkids that are on some odd little binder clip that I found. Watercolor I did of a rabbit, some sketching on just some scrap paper that I glued on, and I made it into a sort of a belly band type pocket. Another picture of the grandkids. Acrylic painting on some music paper, and I made a pocket at the top for it. Picture of my brother and his wife. Another watercolor. And these were cheap watercolors. You can really tell the difference between the cheap watercolors and the nice watercolors. Just an old napkin that I found at some type of a flea market, and I used it as a text spot and had some of this old paper that I had never used before to put in. Another watercolor, dried flower kind of encased between some cellophane, a little bit of stitching around it. The watercolor of an iris, and then I had this neat ledger paper that I liked the green, so I did some inking on some tracing paper and I put the I for iris, and I made a tag. Then it flips out, and I did a little quote here on some purple watercolor. This is just a collage page, so I have this really cool white paper that has some fibers in it, but you really can't use it for a page, so I covered over this black and white. It's just some clipped out things from a nature book. This was an old bird book that I found, and I made it into a little pocket, so there's information on a magpie, and then it has a little magnet clip to close it. I made a little pocket in the back. This magpie was sitting on a branch, and it didn't have the whole branch in the picture, so I cut it out and I just finished the branch with some pen and ink, and I have a signature or a stamp with my initial, and I did some old scratch art. I found some scratch art black and white paper that I've probably had for 10 years, and so I tried my hand at that. It doesn't look too bad on this black and white page. Little quote. I made this into a text spot for some pictures, and I even did a little sort of a charm right there, that some dried flowers from the garden. This was a painting. This was interesting. It was a painting that I did on a tea bag that I had. After I'd used it, I laid it out to dry, and then I did a little bit of watercolor and acrylic on it, and when I Mod Podged it onto the paper, it kind of disappeared. You can sort of see the tea bag right here. It's an interesting texture. And then some honeysuckle from my garden that I pressed. Every year I get my mother and my grandmother amaryllis plants, and so I'm sure she'll recognize that amaryllis. Really like this page. This is some waxy handmade paper that I got in Kansas City, so I made it into a tuck spot and then sewed some different pieces of mulberry paper and handmade paper on to make this, water lilies. It looks a little like Monet, and I wanted something to be kind of watery across from it, so I used some watercolor crayons to do a little koi fish. Made them into tuck spots. Just pictures of my mom and dad from a long time ago and just a few years ago that I thought were neat, so I made them into pockets. I like this page too. This is a hand carved stamp that I made, and later I sewed onto it with a sewing machine and then sewed the spots out so that they came down almost like roots. These are just regular stamps. I had an old silk leaf that I painted on, so I made a little collage that is also a tuck spot. I found a quote about a leaf. My mom has 2 boys, so I found this cute little poem about boys, and then made this side of it into a tuck spot, picture of my brother and I, a little stamp, and a pen and ink of, I believe that's foxglove, over some jelly print paper that I did. I've been trying a new jelly plate that I've never done before, so also made it a tuck spot for a picture. Typed a letter to my mom. Last page is just a little spot. Lots of cool little charms, some pearls and things dangling and hanging. Oh, and a bookmark, beaded bookmark that I'm not very good at beading, so I'll have to put that back on. Hope you liked the video. Maybe it gave you some ideas of things that you might like to do in your own journals. Hey, keep being artsy, people. Have a great day.